This is DW News Africa, the beautiful game and a continental scandal. Is this the breaking point for African football? Celebrations in Morocco after the Confederation of African Football stuns the continent, overturning the AFCON result and rewriting football history. And in Senegal, outrage, disbelief, and claims of corruption. What's behind the shock reversal? In Johannesburg, boots on the ground, from the gas station to your corner grocer. The military moves into lawless neighborhoods to fight crime with a show of force. Order today, but what about tomorrow? I'm Michael Oku. Welcome. A disgrace for Africa. That's how furious fans in Senegal are describing the Confederation of African Football's shock decision to strip the country of its AFCON title as champions of Africa and hand it to Morocco, 2 months after the final was played in Rabat. CAF's appeals board ruled Tuesday that Senegal violated the organization's rules by leaving the field after a highly controversial penalty ruling for Morocco during stoppage time. Senegalese players later returned to the pitch and went on to win 1-0 in extra time. Senegal argues the referee had full authority under CAF rules, and here's the crux, that by allowing play to resume, he essentially validated the final result of that play. Again, a victory for Senegal. Dakar is calling for an international probe into suspected corruption at the organization, while Senegal's Football Federation plans to appeal the ruling, calling it unfair and unprecedented. The case could take up to a year. This whole affair has sparked disbelief among football fans and heated chatter across the continent, especially in Dakar.
I truly think it's a shame. On this continent, the level of football compared to the level of football in the world is distressing, especially when comparing Africa to Europe. It's a great shame, and this will ruin Africa's image.
All of a sudden, Haibo, my friend, texts me to say, hey, you know what? Senegal were kicked out and Morocco were replaced as the champions. I'm like, Kati, what happened? Did things not go accordingly? Kati, what happened? So obviously there's a lot of frustration, anger, confusion, disappointment, but I just want to hear, Kati, what was the reason?
It's a sad day for lovers of football because we feel like we feel like the mandate was stolen.
What's happened is a source of pride for us Moroccans because justice has been done to those who deserve it, no more, no less. Congratulations to us all, and may God crown this success by enabling us to win the World Cup.
African football chief Patrice Motsepe is defending CAF's decision, insisting the organization appointed judges and legal experts from all 54 member nations to guarantee neutrality and integrity.
We have very high standards that we set for ourselves. It is important for us that ordinary football supporters and spectators in every one of the 54 countries in Africa, in their judgment, not in CAF's judgment, not in my judgment, regard the decisions of our judicial bodies as fair, with integrity and impartiality, and what is equally important, that they regard our referees, our VAR operators, and our match commissioners as people who are fair and just, and those decisions that are taken reflects the impartiality and independence.
I'm now joined by sports journalist Olawashina Okeleji in Lagos. Shina, how big a deal is this?
Well, a big deal to this extent that it's like having a heavyweight punch hit you hard in the head. And that's how much this information has. This is what this verdict has done to African football. A continent building its image slowly and creating a huge, name for itself in terms of its flagship competition. For it to now have the winner stripped of the title, it's a big disgrace and, of course, a huge embarrassment, according to a lot of people on the continent of Africa.
I don't know whether you watched this game live. I know you probably watched some of it at least on tape. Maybe you did both, like a lot of us, and you've been keeping in touch with this controversy. What was your reaction when you heard the decision that was made?
Well, I think all of the right decisions that should have been made in the final. Anything after that, it tantamount to just saying you're trying to get a winner via the boardroom. It's never happened in the history of African football. When I was watching the final, I felt like Senegal's action was unacceptable. No one will say what Senegal did was right. But as long as the referee continued the match, that is trying to implement the last law of the game, which says he has the right to decide. As Senegal violated a rule by walking off, that referee had the right to do that. But he didn't do that. He allowed Senegal to continue. A winner emerged, and that was Senegal. For CAF to now wait after 2 months to award, the title to Morocco is absolutely unbelievable. It's shocking. And I think a lot of people were gobsmacked. A lot of people were shocked, surprised. And they say this is the worst of the lows for African football.
Well, there are a lot of people who agree with what you're saying now, but of course there are many people who disagree. There are debates all over social media, heated panels on television. The decision's been like a rolling earthquake across the continent. When you listen in, what are people most fired up about?
I think a lot of people just decide that, look, Senegal won fair and square on the pitch. And for CAF appeals board to now decide that that decision wasn't right is like saying we want to change the rule of the game after a game has been played. I think all of the articles that was quoted in their decision, Article 82, which says when a team walk off the pitch, they completely lose that game. It's not true in this instance because Senegal did not just walk away. They were also allowed and welcome back to play that game. So CAF in itself is saying our rules are our rules. But then again, you can't correct a mistake by creating another mistake and creating a huge one. I think what a lot of people in Africa would say surprises them about this decision is the fact that they've waited this long, and also it's coming after the final whistle has been blown. A winner has emerged. Senegal are champions of Africa. Morocco were the best host of the tournament, not the winner of the football game.
Interesting. CAF says the decision came down to technicalities, but a lot of people are reading through a political lens, a power struggle between North and South. Is that fair, or are we sometimes too quick to link football to power and politics?
I think you can't separate them. We are looking at the incident, just to digress, we are looking at the incident in America now, President Trump, Iran, and whatnot. So you can't separate power, politics from football. But then again, when people talk about this, I mean, the soft play is always in play. You see a lot of, allegations and a lot of controversial things going on within football hierarchy in Africa. I don't think it's a matter of the North against the South or whatnot. I think what is happening here are just individuals and people who just cannot professionally do their job as the heads of African football. They just cannot put their feet down, make a decision, and stand by their decision. I think a lot of people have been critical of the African Cup of Nations, the timing, the organizational structure, the people in play, changing of the formation of the tactics and time of the tournament itself. Now you've had people who now allow the same tournament to be farcical. I mean, the chaos that surrounded the final was all over the world. People could see it. It appears some people wanted Senegal to win, while some believe that Morocco also deserved to win. In football, you will always have people who are for and against you. In this situation, I think the biggest losers and, of course, the biggest disappointment are those in charge of African football. They are the ones that are ridiculing African football before the rest of the world. So, in my opinion, I think all of the political conversations, allegations, and whatnot is only allowed here by people who just refuse to do what they are supposed to do. How can the tournament go from the best in 2024 to being the worst in 2026? It's unbelievable.
Well, let's talk more about those officials. Many fans are not just questioning the decision itself, but also the credibility of CAF as an institution. How damaging is this, you think, to the organization's legitimacy, and can it in fact recover?
I think it'll be difficult for them to recover from this. I think it's a huge damage. It's a big blow to African football. It's like a hammer blow to a house that was already crumbling. I mean, there's the positive about CAF announcing that there's a growth in terms of viewership of the African game. There are also positives that diaspora is following the African game. It's won a lot of art, but the damaging impact and effect of the tournament itself has completely come from CAF, the organizers themselves. Because here you have people who just can't be intentional about development, people who just can't be intentional about being professional about the way an organization is run. If CAF is a private organization, I believe all the board members would have been walked out of the office and they would have lost their job by now.
Obviously, we don't have CAF here to speak for themselves, but I want to ask you this. When the dust finally settles, do you think this will be remembered as a stain on African football or a blip we all move on from?
Like you said, will they bounce back? I think it will be a difficult call. It depends on who is going to make that sacrifice to say, you know what, I messed up, I need to walk away. People in power in Africa don't walk away from problems. They just try to pepper the cracks. And when you pepper the cracks for so long, you get a messy situation like this. I don't see them bouncing back from this. They will be remembered as the people who created the biggest thing on the image of African football.
Well, we are feeling the heat that you are throwing down. That's sports journalist Olawashina Okaleji. Many thanks.
Thank you for having me.
So imagine waking up to soldiers patrolling your neighborhood. That's a reality some South Africans will face over the next year as more than 2,000 troops are deployed to tackle gang violence and illegal mining in 5 provinces. The move has brought relief for some communities, but critics warn it won't fix the root causes of crime in the country. We have a security expert's assessment for you in a moment, but first, here's DW's Diane Hawker-Kalubi.
This isn't a war zone. It's a neighborhood in Randfontein, South Africa, where illegal miners have set up a gold processing operation just a few meters away from people's homes. These soldiers have been deployed as part of a government effort to put a stop to different types of organized crime. Illegal mining has grown more prevalent in recent years, with the government saying it accounts for 3.69 billion euros in lost revenue. Communities that border illegal mining hotspots hear gun battles between warring groups and sometimes face direct threats. Many were too afraid to speak on camera, but this man was willing to explain what it's like living here.
At night, it's not safe. And as we grow up here in this place, it was very quiet. Now, these days, when if we try to reach them, tomorrow they'll come to your house.
By the time the soldiers arrived, the illegal miners had run away, leaving behind generators, baths, drums, and metal chains used to process gold.
So the soldiers behind me have started destroying the materials used for illegal mining. The drums are something that are called pendukas, which is a Zulu word that basically means to turn. So they are trying to destroy as many of these drums as well as the baths that are laying around here so that they can't be used at a later stage.
South Africa's President, Cyril Ramaphosa, authorized the deployment of 2,200 soldiers to major cities in 5 provinces. This includes Johannesburg, where gang and drug crimes have taken hold in the neighborhood of Westbury. Turf battles between 2 gangs, the Fast Guns and the Varados, have left residents like Valerie Lebon fearful. She says many residents believe that there are police officers in cahoots with the gangs.
I'm one of the people who's been praying and asking for the military to come in because what we have realized is, and a lot of people say that when you speak to them, don't you know that there's fast gun cops and there's Varado cops?
However, she is concerned that the deployment won't solve the neighborhood's underlying problem of unemployment, which she believes leads many youngsters into gang life.
Here's a mother, she's 45. Still strong, she can go and work. But there's no opportunities for her. This child of hers, who's now 18, finished matric, sees the hunger in the house and blah, blah, blah. A drug dealer grabs him and he becomes a dealer, a runner. And that is how my community have gone to the ground because of lack of opportunities. It hurts me.
Critics are concerned about sending troops who are trained for combat, not police work, into communities. Military and police leaders say soldiers have been given additional training to avoid civilian clashes and say they will stay in their lane, as required by law.
We don't have those ambitions to be policemen. We remain as soldiers. That's why we're saying we'll give those enemies, we'll create conditions that will make it impossible for those criminals to continue to operate with impunity.
Some analysts have questioned whether the deployment will solve the larger problem of growing organized crime.
I think it's partially an admittance that there's a fundamental failure in our police force, our police service. If they can't do the basics of dealing with organized crime and dealing with drug dealing neighborhoods and criminals running guns and drugs throughout certain city districts, if one of the core competencies of a police force has gotten to such a low point that they are calling in the military, then we have a fundamental issue with how our police are structured and operating.
Despite these concerns, residents in the affected areas tell us they see this deployment as a win. But they also want to see long-term changes that will ensure their safety after the troops depart.
Earlier, I spoke to Dr. Anine Kriegler, who researches justice and violence prevention at the Institute for Security Studies in South Africa. I asked her what the evidence tells us about deploying the military to fight crime and whether soldiers on the streets really reduce violent crime or simply change how safe people feel.
It's been done a number of times before, and it's seldom been properly evaluated. They tend to be sent in, and then when they leave, it's unclear whether anything has changed or not. The evaluations that have been done show that it is possible that sending in the army can have a short-term stabilizing impact on an area, but it isn't sustained because it doesn't make any difference to the underlying drivers of violence.
Are there lessons that you can derive from what little study has been done from those chapters that should inform government officials or military leaders today about what worked and what didn't?
The first key lesson is that what they do while they're there is, of course, critical. If they are just there to be a show of force, to general visibility, boots on the ground, that is not going to make any significant difference. It will possibly comfort communities in the short term who are desperate to see some kind of response from the state. But there are long-term structural changes that need to be made both in the criminal justice system and outside of the policing sphere and outside of the law enforcement sphere to make those changes. So that means intelligence-led investigations, ensuring that the criminal justice, the organized criminal networks are in fact dismantled and disrupted in the long term.
What about this whole thing worries you the most?
I think what worries me the most is that there doesn't seem to be a clear articulation of what will be different afterwards. What is the success criterion? What is going? There've been a lot of statements about what will be done while they're there, but then what? How will the situation be different in a year's time once they are withdrawn from that area? That is not being made clear yet at all.
You're saying that essentially this could just be a temporary Band-Aid.
Definitely. I think the government is saying a lot of the right things in terms of saying that this is temporary. They realize that this is not a holistic solution, but there still isn't any sense of how will they and how should the rest of the country and the rest of the world assess whether this was a success or not? What are those criteria of whether a meaningful change has happened?
There's another worry here that we haven't really touched on. Some people are concerned that sending soldiers who are trained for combat rather than community policing is asking for trouble, especially in densely populated neighborhoods where there's already distrust for law enforcement. Do you feel that way?
Yes, that is a very serious concern. And the previous times that the army has been deployed in areas like this, including related to the COVID lockdown, there were a number of incidents of use of force that seem completely beyond the bounds of what would be expected of the police. One of the reasons there's been quite a delay since the announcement was made by the president about a month or so ago is that there has been a great deal of training and work on the coordination and command structures to ensure that kind of thing doesn't happen again. But as you say, soldiers are not police. The relationship between soldiers and the places where they work is not the same as what the police do. So that is a very serious risk, and there will have to be very strong oversight and consequences for any departures from that.
You mentioned earlier deeper fundamental causes of organized crime and not addressing those issues. So let's talk a little bit more about that. What are those causes you think that are not being addressed?
So some of those causes are related to weaknesses in South Africa's criminal justice system. Challenges that the police have had in terms of putting together strong investigations, getting convictions, really dismantling and getting the intelligence necessary to structurally unmake some of these very strong organized criminal networks. And that's not just the police, it's also in prosecutions and so on. But of course, the main drivers, especially in places like Cape Town, where the problem is gang violence, are socioeconomic. There are very good reasons why young men, boys really, are being attracted to gangs in these areas. There are no other options for them in some places. And unless those socioeconomic, spatial, and traumas that these people live with every day are addressed in a very targeted way in these areas, the magnet will still be there and people will still be drawn to these exact same ways of life and the violence that goes with it.
Paint a picture for me, Anine, if you could. Somebody who's never been to South Africa. You talked about the fact that crime is rampant, that people are very concerned about it. Just walk me through the day. A typical South African citizen wakes up in the morning. At what points during the day do you worry about crime, and what kinds of crime are you concerned about?
Interesting question, and I have to say that there is no typical South African citizen because of the legacy of apartheid and our really, I think we still have the highest level of inequality of any country in the world. So the disparity in what an ordinary day looks like for a South African is astonishing to people who haven't seen it. But I would say for a middle-class South African, it's mostly property crimes, so burglaries, thefts, but also robberies, street robberies with a knife or a firearm. Those would be the main concerns, as well as robberies in the home. But for people in the most deprived areas, it is a moment-to-moment risk of attack and violence at any second. The extent of firearm availability in these areas is so vast. There are just multiple shots going off in a day, and people caught, innocent bystanders caught in the crossfire, including children in many cases. So a lot of variation, and it depends entirely on where you are.
Why, in your view, is Ramaphosa deploying the military? Is it good optics, a show of strength, or is the situation so dire it does in fact require drastic measures?
The situation is extremely dire and does require drastic measures. The question is this that measure? I think it's absolutely understandable that this call was made because this didn't come out of nowhere. His announcement was on the back of a number of calls from different communities, in Cape Town and other parts of the country saying, we're desperate, we don't see the police, and there are shootings here every day, and we need to see that the state takes this seriously. So that is a very understandable call for help from communities. And then, of course, it's relatively easy to send in some troops as opposed to really facing up to what is not working in policing and in the criminal justice system overall, and how do we begin addressing that properly. So it's much easier to respond to those desperate calls in this way than in the way that will make a lasting difference.
Okay, that's Dr. Anine Kriegler. Many, many thanks to you.
Thank you.
We're going to end it there. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.